Okay, we are back streaming, so we'll turn it back over to Renato.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To continue on, this is what's called a risk matrix, where in asset management, we look at what is the likelihood of an asset failing and what's the consequence of that asset failing. So different asset classes would have obviously a different risk profile. And what the software allows us to do is to take all of our, again, road segments and classify them in terms of this matrix, which shows how many assets and dollar value are in the red, which is critical, and then orange, yellow, green, and blue, which is obviously very low risk to extreme risk. And again, what we can see is that what this represents is that if we're only spending for the next 10 years money on things that are in the extreme risk or in the critical category, if we only focus on those, then as time goes on, the stuff in the assets in the orange then become red, in yellow become orange, and so forth. It's a cascading effect. So, and because again, the town, by not having set aside enough funds to be able to maintain the assets, and we're now dealing with again, just on the roadside and what's shown in the facilities audit, is that hence why we need to increase the capital investment on these assets. So we have a bit of catching up to do, and we need to lay a program out that identifies to make sure that we can get out of the red and lay a path of sustainability. It's not going to happen overnight. If it took decades to get to this point, it's not going to, again, happen overnight. That's why I think it's important we look long term in terms of what the needs are over the next 10 years and lay out a strategy and a path to achieve that sustainability. So, and as of right now, I'll call up, she's already up, the RCP director to speak to some of the slides in relation to some of the assets and what we've seen in the RCP department. So, Julie, perfect time.
Good morning, members of council and staff. I'm going to keep my overview really quick and keep it simple. So I just thought visually it would be a great opportunity to show some of the concerns we have with the facility asset management in our department, focusing mostly on roofs. We have brought forward, as council is aware, we had an emergency roof repair that was required at the TCC this past fall. Actually, today they're on site doing a $95,000 roof replacement at part of the auditorium. Literally rained inside the auditorium when it was raining outside. So we are excited to share that our director of finance is very passionate about facility asset management. For our department, it means addressing things such as on the screen, you can see the museum. We have a lot of work to do over there with our slate roof and some of our roofing infrastructure. The next photo to the right is at the Public Works building and some of the roof leaking that's happening. You can see the dilapidation on the materials coming from the roof membrane. To the right of that is literally, we have vegetation growing on our museum roof. Below that, you can see a quick replacement we did on a seal that was about 8-foot long gap that we found. When I first started, we had someone come up and do a review of the roof over at the customer service building. That whole section of roof has to be replaced. We've put that in the budget for 2023. Again, another visual of our roof dilapidation over at the museum. And then to the right of that is just most recently, we did the Lake Lisgar roof and some pooling water issues we have. So in a basic nutshell, I think photos say 1,000 words. So hopefully you can have an appreciation as council members, some of the work before us moving into 2023 and beyond. So another quick overview and visual. I just thought it was important. I know the Director of Finance has been focusing on our 10-year capital, which has been a big help for us in facilities, and I know it is for operations as well. So I just wanted to take an overview of Tillsonburg, present the map, and show you in the next 10 years. I took the 9 biggest projects that we're looking at and where we're investing as per the facility asset management plan that was prepared and presented to us. And it's just a quick overview. I won't go line by line, but overall in these 9 locations, we have about a $36 million investment to maintain our current assets. And this obviously doesn't include things that were just added. We have new playgrounds, we have new splash pads. So these things will be added to our facility asset management plan as we move forward. But it's just a quick overview and a snapshot to let council know our 10-year capital. It's going to take a lot of investment to maintain what we already have. Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Rosart has a question.
Oh, sorry. The clock tower, is that covering it up or replacing taking the brick off and replacing it, or is that pointing it?
I can speak. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Rosart. I would have to go, sorry, I don't have off the top of my head the exact, I can pull it up right now and answer that question, but all of the repairs and renovations for those 9 on the slide that total that work. I don't off the top of my head remember what it included, but I can get that answer for you quickly.
Thank you.
As we switch over and allow our Director of Operations to, I'll stop sharing my screen and then he will share his screen. So just one moment.
Morning. We had a map that we were able to create in the last moment that should have been in the package. So the intention is to bring this to light. Just bear with me for a second. So asset management in terms of the operations and engineering department, that's really where a lot of this logic came from at the beginning. To go back a little bit in terms of Renato's presentation, we want to be getting out of a reactive state into a proactive position. And that's what really this is delineating, is that we're becoming more proactive, and that's an underpin for our 10-year financial plan and also with our asset management plan itself. So these are the corrective measures that would be overlaying some of the activities as it relates to the risk matrix, which in a segment for road includes payment condition index, age, risk, and levels of service. So as we consider that, we can go to this map, which delineates our conditional assessment in a map format, being poor, fair, fairly good, good, and excellent. As you can recall through the budget discussion,
It's me.
I think that's the echo coming from, that was from the chief. Anyways, so if we look at the 10-year forecast for roads, we're in reconstruction. We want to get out of that and get into renewals, life cycle renewals. This map overlays some of the poor conditions that we have to address for 10 years, and we can share that as a supplementary conversation to council in future. But getting back to the actual presentation itself, barring that some of the other authorities under my department, fleet is another one, and it has been identified that we should be looking into our fleet replacement program. And we have a number of policies that underline this, including the newly arranged enterprise, which we'll be examining in the first quarter of next year to bring back to council in terms of our strategies in terms of fleet replacement. The next slide delineates some generic policies as it would be. I don't know why this is not working for me. Very laggy. Okay. My apologies. Nope. Other way. You can tell this is Renato's slide deck, not mine. So this is some of the basic logic that we have for fleet replacement, where the green line shows the actual investment of taking on the purchase and the depreciation over time. The blue line underneath of it represents the operational cost for replacement, or sorry, the operational cost as it relates to investments, whether that be engine repairs. Usually we exclude oil and tires because those are incidentals. So we're looking for the big repairs that are involved in our fleet. The slide underneath of it shows the time and the usage. That's what we really need to define. Each specific piece of equipment has a different value that we should be looking into examining, whether that be a tandem plow, a sidewalk machine, or just a generic truck. So the policy will actually refine more of the time and usage in terms of the trade-in value for us. Also projecting ahead that we'd like to get out of a cycle of having all our fleet come due in and around the same time. We want to spread this out so that we have the best optimal use of our fleet, our cash flow, and most importantly, our dependency, because our levels of service are defined by the fact that in operations, can we actually get out there and clear a sidewalk? If all our equipment fails at the same time, we're not doing our job. So we have to spread this out a little bit more so that we make sure that we have some redundancies in the system, but more, again, going back to that proactive position rather than a reactive state. So with that being said, I think I'll pass it back to Renato unless there's any questions.
Counselor Parsons.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. On that particular last slide, where the fleet logic, when would you be able to put some numbers to this in terms of life cycle, in terms of lease versus ownership, that sort of thing, to get some real good data from you?
I'm hoping to bring that back for draft consideration in the first quarter of 2023. I know it won't fall within our budget cycle of this year, but this is something that we can rely on moving ahead. There was 2 policies that we have used in past, one from 2014 that should be updated. So I'm hoping to bring that forward as quickly as possible, given that some of the fleet discussion that we've had to date.
Just to follow up, the budget for fleet replacement is pretty significant. I sure would like to get some more information on metrics, how to measure the replacement of that fleet in a quicker way. If there's anything you can do to provide some backup to the budget that we see here today, I would appreciate that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, on the back end of the operations, which I believe is page 57 and 58, although that might be an old presentation material, there is a chart in terms of the fleet replacement. The last column for comments, we've added some logic as it relates to asset management. You can see in that in terms of the sidewalk machines that we've actually incurred more sidewalks. So that's the justification in terms of the purchase. For a quick and easy rule, there's a rule called the 50% rule, which basically says that the total purchase value of your vehicle, if it's subject to 50% of the total cost of not replacement, but the activities related to renewing, engine repairs, so on and so forth, if that's 50% of the total value, and this is just an industry guideline, we should be considering trade-in because that's the best optimal point for trade-in value. Locally, and what we're proposing with the policy in 2023 is we get to define those margins, right? Not every piece of equipment should be going to the 50% rule. Rather, a tandem truck should be spread out over 8 years, 10 years, what have you. But that all comes back down to levels of service and the cycle of renewal that we have in terms of the entire fleet. We also want to consider optimization, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself in terms of some of the proposals. For instance, the tractor that we're proposing for lawn cutting activities at the airport, we currently have more staff there with sidewalk machines with decks for mowers doing the activity. That's an inefficient use of our manpower. That's an inefficient use of our equipment. We can do it a lot quicker if we scale up. And we're going to be trying to show that to council as we go through our discussions today.
Thank you. Page 57 of which document? Is it the budget binder we have, or what document can I?
I believe it would be the budget slide deck there. What's that one? Tab 6.
Tab 6, page
Okay.
57. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Parker.
Through you, Mayor Gilvazy, to Jonathan. I know that you kind of came in the middle of the budget process. And I assume that it'll take time, but there was supposed to be a review of the fleet rental program for the budget so that we could make decisions on if we wanted to continue on forward with it, because there are some identifiable issues that could come up in the future with the possibility of that program ever ending and not having any vehicles and having to replace all of them. So I was really hoping to see that in the budget. I know that you said that you're planning on bringing one forward in Q1, but that doesn't really help us at this point in time because we may be purchasing vehicles or losing vehicles out of our fleet and starting lease programs. And then if something happens or we decide not to go forward with it, we may end up having to end with it. So I was wondering if there is any way that we can get some type of information about that program before the end of the budget process, because and I know it's a lot of time and effort into a report like that, but I think it's very beneficial to have that here before us today instead of waiting for a full year.
I can certainly look into that, and it's noted. It might be piecemealing and bringing back a draft related just to the enterprise relationship that we have, and then maybe moving on to the larger trucks after the fact. But I can certainly try to get something to council as soon as possible.
Perfect, thank you. And then I guess a question for Mayor Gilvese. Do you want resolutions now, or do you want resolutions at the end of the meeting? Put it on now. Okay. I do have a couple for right now, and the first would be moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart that a white paper report be brought forward to council in regards to the costs associated with the residential sidewalk plowing program and any risks that may come forward with changing the program. Obviously, there's a lot of fleet replacement and costs associated with this program. I guess looking for comparisons from other municipalities, it's an opportunity for us to fall in line if it makes sense. So I'm hoping to get a report back on that. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Does everyone understand what a white paper is? So Councillor Parker's just asking for more information to be brought back. Looking at best practices, basically in other municipalities. Okay, we'll call a vote on that. All those in favor? It's carried. Nope. Did you have another one?
I did have a second one. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart that a white paper report be brought forward to council in regards to the proposed leaf pickup program that was brought forward in 2022. I know that it was, and I'd like to speak to that. I know it was deferred just because of the timing, and I'd like to see that come back so that now we have the opportunity to have a little bit more thorough discussion and proper communication out to the public if we decide to go down that road of making that change.
Okay.
Any questions from council? So this is regarding the LEAF program. Just for new council members, we did receive a report back in October, I believe it was, on changing the LEAF program. So this is basically going to bring that information back to new council. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And no one's opposed, no one, so that's carried. I do have a question, and it goes back to something Councillor Parker mentioned about the enterprise vehicles. Is there a way that program could be paused on, like, if council doesn't get the information with this budget? Because I know it's onerous. I wrote the resolution, I remember it. And if we don't have that information in time, is there any way that program could be paused until we do have that information?
I would have to defer to the manager of public works for that, just because I'm not too fluid with the arrangement to date.
We can, right now we have 4 leased vehicles put into our inventory right now. We can pause it for it and just not request any vehicles until such time that council's had an opportunity to review our findings. So we're not committed to anything at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one more resolution as well. That this isn't a white paper, but moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rosehart, that a report be added to the bylaw business plan to review the possibility of having bylaw enforcement adjusted to cover overnight hours to alleviate the stress that bylaw enforcement causes on the OPP. This should include costs and potential revenue that could be generated.
Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, this is an opportunity. As the community grows, I think there's the possibility to improve our bylaw enforcement. The OPP are taxed with the number of calls that they receive for certain areas in town. On-street overnight parking, calls to the outdoor rink, all that. Every time there's a call, it costs the town money. So this is an opportunity for us to look and review and possibly, if we need to, grow our bylaw department. And it also creates opportunities for revenue for ticketing overnight parking, which is something that you don't hear very often. So thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns as to what that motion's about? No, and just to confirm, when provincial fines are laid by the OPP, all the revenue goes to the county. And then when bylaw lays fines, the revenue comes to the town. So, and I think that motion in part speaks to that. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's carried, no one opposed. Thank you.
We just have one comment to that, Mayor.
Just in comment to Councillor Parker's resolution, what we've done is we've proactively put a plan and a practice in place where, because my winter operations road staff are out there throughout the night, throughout the entire winter, we are being trained and approved to write tickets for vehicles that are parked overnight. So that relieves a lot of the municipal enforcement staff of having to go out overnight and do blitzes and keep them in play during the course of the daytime.
That's great. Is that in place already? Will it be for this winter season?
It'll be for this winter season. You're just finalizing a little bit of training and stuff like that, and we'll be ready to roll for winter.
I have a follow to that. I guess my question is through to Richard. With that, and the amount of people that do park on the street during the winter months, how much time do you think that adds to the snow removal process? If it's your snow operators that are actually ticketing, is it going to increase the amount of time that it takes to get the roads cleared and stuff like that?
Our plow operators won't be ticketing. It'll be mainly the patrol people that'll be driving around, but they'll be receiving word from plow operators that certain vehicles are parked as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, through the mayor. I just had a question when we were looking at page 56 and 57 about the fleet replacement. And I think it's with the fire department, but it's under the fleet replacement. I was just curious for the ATV unit, how often this would be required? Like, how often do we get calls that would require an ATV? Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Spencer, that's a 2024 ask. We've put that in there as a placeholder for 2024. We have noticed an increase in medical calls and other, I'm going to say, related incidents on the trail system. As you're aware, we have a vast trail system, a number of ravines and whatnot. So it's more or less a placeholder for a discussion for the 2024 budget cycle, in particular capital.
Okay, I think that is part of the fleet budget. So, okay, Councillor Parker, but I just would like to focus back and get back to where we actually are in the budget.
So with fleet, it is listed on page 132, and it's in the 2023 capital project listing of new requests, X51 new ATV. So I was actually had questions about that later on as well. So, but seeing it as it is in the fleet, is it in the 2023 budget or is it in the 2024 budget?
Through your worship to the councillor, I believe it's in the 2023 budget. And again, for the ask in the 24.
Through the mayor, for clarification, it's a 2024 item. I don't know why it's showing up there, but it's actually in the 2024 capital program.
So we would have to make an adjustment for that if the need is in 2024. But again, I think we're getting into the weeds of the next transition, and I think we should be focusing back at
Right.
the man.
Just carrying on with the overall presentation, we will be, after this presentation, we will start into the departmental budgets where we'll be able to provide more details to the questions being posed. So just overall, just wanted to highlight, just added this extra slide just to kind of tie in that in our July, in the 2022 asset management plan that we provided, submitted to the province. The infrastructure report card, you can see the condition versus performance rating, but then also there's funding versus need. And as based on the 2022 budget, why the Fs are showing up is in terms of the overall, again, what the capital contribution was as part of the 2022 and where the funding was at versus the need. And as we can see, as what we've presented is trying to address that. So just wanted to highlight for council, currently, this is what's in our 2022 asset management plan. In terms of the integration with financial planning, again, just to emphasize that if we only look at budgeting for the operating expenses and then the interest and the amortization, which to us, it's really the value of sort of the transfer to the reserve. And if we only focus on what the cost of that asset was, we're not really funding for service enhancements, system growth, and for inflation. And that's where, again, part of this budget, we've tried to look at incorporating those. And again, this was part of that guide from the province in terms of how we need to integrate asset management with the financial planning. And again, this is part of that study that I referred to, which looked at the fact that wearing one of our strategic planning goal or strategic plan goals is for the township to be a leader in the sector. Just by moving to a multi-year budget framework for a township of this size, the town is taking a leadership position in terms of looking at not just the capital, as we can see the percentage there. Most of other municipalities, there's only about half that look at a multi-year capital and only about 13% were multi-year and operating. So the town is being very proactive and we commend council for setting that strategic goal because it will help with the long-term strategic thinking in alignment with the strategic plan. And again, one of the observations here as well was that the dedicated capital levy, again, being seen across 50% of the sector. So mostly it is the largest, should we say, 15 municipalities across the province that are really sort of the leaders within the sector. And then it kind of in various stages, other municipalities, how much we adopt some of those practices. And again, recommending the capital levy is one of those pillars of funding for maintenance and capital programs. Again, just to demonstrate how one of the strategic goals we are looking at these, part of the recommendations is the implementation of some of these best practices from leading municipalities. And again, just to emphasize the strategic plan goals, that we are always mindful that a number of the activities that we undertake to align with council's direction. And we believe that this budget as presented is doing that and trying to address some of the priority projects. In relation to the one talking about the municipal reserves, because we talked about how much we're drawing down on the reserves. With asset management, it's not so much trying to attain a certain reserve balance. Reserves are set aside to be utilized in future years. As you can see from the charts in terms of the expenditures, those bars fluctuate up and down. So there are certain years where the capital program, depending on how much infrastructure is coming up for renewal, there will be more needs in one year than another year. What we try to do is to identify what the contribution should be and trying to stabilize that at a more of an even level so that the levy doesn't fluctuate with the capital requirements. And so one of the things of just looking at a single year budget is that you're constantly trying to adjust based on that current year's needs. Whereas looking forward, we can see that in every year, those anticipated projects, the total requirements are going to fluctuate, but we're trying to stabilize the levy to a level whereby it will have enough, we'll be able to have enough funds in any given year to undertake those projects. So it's not so much about a certain reserve target as much as the target is now the capital contribution to the overall program. And that's why, again, the dedicated capital levy.
Excuse me, Your Worship. So ideally, I hear that, and that's what I think the goal is beyond the 10-year period. That if we move forward with that plan, there should be a flat line on capital from levy, right? I mean, we're going to be pretty close to a flat line.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally, yeah. Things will come up, I realize, but
Yes.
that's the overall goal.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so we've talked about the provincial requirements, and the reason I wanted to put this slide at the end, not at the beginning, is because again, if we only do asset management to meet the provincial requirements, we've missed out on the spirit of what asset management is all about. But looking at what it is that we are legislated to provide. And so in 2024, the next threshold that we have to meet, again, is that the asset management plan includes all infrastructure assets. So that's everything that the town owns has to be in our inventory. We have to know what we own, when it was put into place, what value, what's its current value, what's its estimated useful life, and what's the replacement value of all assets. And then in addition to that, it's also looking to look at what are the current service levels. So that will need to be also identified in the plan and passed by council in terms of, for example, roads to say, because that's an easy one for me. It's because it works off, as the director of operations noted, one of the components of identifying what the infrastructure is for roads needs is the pavement condition index. So we can take a look and say across the entire roads network, we have the average of the entire network could be at say 75, and that number is the PCI index. So if that's a level of service, what would it cost the town if we wanted to go up to 80 PCI, or how much could we save if we went down to 70? And so putting dollar values to that and then setting that, let's say, as a target in terms of the level of service. Then it also requires asset performance, again, condition, age, replacement cost, and then where the work that the town has done in the 10-year, we also have to provide 10-year life cycle costs and funding to maintain those service levels. So all the work that we're doing, again, it's helping the town set a more strategic long-term direction, but also helping us with the requirements. We do have to provide this information to the province. So we're meeting legislative requirements, but it's not just that, we're incorporating that in the town's decision-making processes. And that's really the spirit behind asset management. We also realized that by July 1st, 2025, there's another threshold, and that is to address all the funding shortfalls related to all the infrastructure assets. And so while we're trying to do that through the budget, again, the data will be refined and we'll have to make sure that we incorporate that into the asset management plan. There's also ongoing requirements. In July 1st of every single year, council shall conduct an annual review of its asset management planning process. And we can demonstrate that by council passing a resolution that it has completed that review. We also take a look at that the asset management plan normally from here on in will need to be updated every 5 years. In addition to that, if we go back to the very top, in 2019, the town also had to pass a strategic asset management policy and that is to be updated at least every 5 years. So that will be 2024 in conjunction with those other requirements. So the town will be working, again, all the effort behind asset management. We have to review the policy, undertake the work, also look at additional policies, again, in terms of debt policy, financing of the capital, year-end surplus policy, revenue policy, really towards developing that long-term financial strategy and financial plan is also really part of the requirements that will help us fulfill the legislative requirements. So that's, again, all the work that we're doing is helping across the board to help in addition to ensuring that we have the proper data to guide long-term decision-making. So again, just the recommendations overall. 2023 is a 4.3% capital levy. Then we're asking for 3% in 24, 25, and 1% onwards. And just to summarize again, overall, even with the infrastructure deficit, as we talked about in the required funding, 2023, given the rate of growth, it is a 2.77% tax rate change. And that's the overall presentation. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. And if there's any questions.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick one through you, Mayor. We're talking about the requirements for the asset management program. Is that based on the asset as it is today? Or let me just maybe get to the bottom line. What if we have to widen a road for whatever purpose? What if we have to do major construction and turn a 2-lane road into a 4? Those things are not included in this, are they? We're basically dealing with what we have now to maintain it for where it's going to be in the future. Or is there any room for expansion in this asset management program?
I can see our Director of Operations wants to jump in on that. I'll just go ahead, Jonathan.
I'll shut this up.
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, one of the conditions that I didn't identify for consideration through the matrix is traffic volumes and counts. That would drive the decision to widen a road or other safety concerns. So what asset management encourages us to do is think long range. And it's not necessarily meant to be that we have to be 100% accurate on what's going to happen in year 5, but rather that we should have framework to say what's going to happen as we go along. So that consideration would come to council on a future date. If you're looking towards more of expropriation or getting the land in that instance, that's a little bit trickier because we only have the right of way that we have. But certainly those parameters and those conditions keep going as asset management in the industry. And I don't know if we've said this to date, it's a living document. It's not meant to be on the shelf. It's meant to be refined constantly, barring the parameters that we put in and barring the conversations that we have with council and determining those levels of service.
So the answer is yes, this program as it is now is for some form of expansion if needed for safety purposes.
Certainly it can be considered, but then there's all those compounding effects of cost. When do we do it? How far ahead are we looking? And then, yes, it can change.
Thank you, Councilor Parker. Do you have a resolution to receive this part of this information?
I do, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Rosehart, that the overview of the asset management financing strategy and strategic plan goals is information.
Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's carried.
If I could, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to just expand on that question. When we say asset management, so there's 2 parts. There is the asset management, there's the asset accounting. So everything that we own, when the town has all the assets that it owns, PSAP was the asset accounting. We need to report on that in our financial statements. So in the asset management side of things, that's where we're looking forward. And we're trying to look at what, not only looking after the infrastructure that we do own, but all of what's planned and what's coming down the line. So that's really part of the overall program. The minute the town acquires those assets, then they become part of our inventory. And that is then what is reported on. So our financial statements reflect what we currently own. And then the asset management plan is not just what we own, but the broader program in terms of looking outwards and trying to make sure that we have a sustainable level of funding to replace what we have, but also project out the funding required for future growth.
I guess now we're moving into the different departments, and I think the office of the CAO is up first. I would just like to remind staff that as we go through the business plans, high level like highlights, please don't read the whole PowerPoint. We should have all prepared and read that in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council, fellow staff. So in the business plans for 2023 for the CAO, we have the continuation of physician recruitment. And I'm sure council will have a discussion around expanding physician recruitment and what that will entail. The town hall project, we'll be looking to either move that forward or put an end to that. So the discussion will take place with council in 2023 on that. Of course, we're going to continue on with attainable and affordable housing. The committee is moving forward with that. We have some land designated that we provided to the county to look into further. Boundary adjustment as well. The committee is moving forward with that. Again, just like last year, we budgeted $60,000 for strategic initiatives. This year, that money was to be used for boundary adjustment and in a RFP to look at our growth initiatives. And of course, we have some additional money to cover the municipal management intern. You'll recall that this is approximately 65% funded and will end in February 28th of next year. Moving on to the HR component, I will cover that. We have budgeted $50,000 for a pay equity market review. Progressive municipalities do this every 4 to 5 years. The last time we've done this was 2017, and it wasn't implemented till 2020. So we'll be looking to update that. We'll be looking to do a staff engagement survey. This was in the budget last year, but was removed. And of course, investigate options for volunteer recognition as well, which was in the budget last year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Short and sweet. Questions? No questions. I actually did just wanted to confirm that the 300,000 for the town hall was carried forward from last year.
So Renata, I'm looking for your indulgence on this to help me out, but I'm thinking the answer is no, because originally we were going to pay through that money through debentures, and then it was removed. Can you comment further on that, Renato?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, sorry. Yes, the 2022 budget had 254,000 identified to be debentured for town hall, the studies and the preliminary designs. That was determined not to be an eligible project by Infrastructure Ontario. Therefore, that money would then have to be funded from a reserve. And so in 2023, that is in the budget as coming from the tax rate stabilization reserve.
Okay. Thank you. I have one more question. I was going to go through you, Mayor, and I'm like, no, I'm sitting up here. I'm just so used to saying it. I have a question. So regarding the pay equity and market review, and I think I saw it was either in Q3 or Q4. Is this something that could be bumped up maybe to Q1 or like a little sooner in the year?
Absolutely, through the mayor. So the RFP is ready to go out. We have it ready, so we will be looking to send that out right away. The issue with, so that's just the RFP portion. So the RFP, once a consultant is retained, they'll come back with a report. There will be costs to implement that study. There is no costs budgeted in 2023 for that. So if we want to move that forward, we'd have to budget the cost to implement that, and those costs are unknown at this time.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll leave it where it is then. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you. Can I ask a question through you to the CAO, and just looking at the financial plan 2023, I noted that we were just on the council line about $40,000 over budget in 2022, and going forward in 2023, it's significant. It's $110,000 on that council line. Is there something you can explain that would cause that increase?
The treasurer to help me out with this one because in our Q3 reports, we did update that. I don't have the answer in front of me. Renato, do you remember what the drive was on the council line expenditure? Councilor Parsons, we're just pulling the information up right now through the treasurer.
I would just add, if you don't have it today, sometime I'd like to understand why that increase is there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do you have the information or will you provide it at a later time?
We can provide it at the next meeting if that's okay to provide the specific details.
It's fine. Thank you. So are you good with that? Perfect. So now we're moving on to financial services.
For you, Madam Mayor, the business objectives for finance remain similar to 2022. We have some carry forward projects. The first one identified in the business objective is there was a project as part of the intake 3 funding from the province for modernization funding. This was a joint project between the county, Ingersoll, and the town. And it dealt with reviewing opportunities to streamline our accounts payable processes. There was basically a solution that was identified by the county and just going through the implementation of that. There are some components on the technical side that did not go as planned, and therefore just working through that. And once that is rectified, then both the town and Ingersoll would be moving forward with part of that solution. So that's just a carry forward project. The only caveat there is that that 33,000 identified as part of the project cost, that's the town's portion of the contribution. If we do not get a chance to complete this project by the end of February, then the provincial funding component only will not be carried forward. So we're hopeful to be able to move forward on this, to be able to leverage that funding. The other one is obviously the continuation of the multi-year budget development, and again, the integration with asset management. So just setting some money to be able to continue fine-tuning the processes and the system that we've started this year to further align our systems, as we noted through the presentation. The other items have no dollar component, but they're work identified in terms of some of the items that we've discussed, some of the policy review, reserves and trusts, revenue policy, accounts receivable, or tangible capital asset policy. All those will need to be reviewed, and that's part of the work for 2023, as well as then some of the foundational work on 2024 to 2026, which on the next slide, which speak to an accounts receivable collections policy and a write-off policy. Again, the revenue policy, financial sustainability plan, looking at creating that plan and having all the related components of that be worked on. Again, updated debt policy, tangible capital assets, all of that is anticipated to either be completed or starting that work as foundational work over the next for the term of council. Overall, some of the risks and opportunities. There are some new audit requirements that is requiring the county to look at its IT infrastructure, especially with cyber risk and what the sector is facing in terms of that, and ensuring that we have the proper systems and protocols in place to minimize those risks, and we're working in concert with the county, who's the provider of our IT services, to ensure that we have the proper mitigation strategies in place for that risk. One of the additional items in terms of risks is, as we all know, the sector, there's a number of staffing transitions, and just being able to achieve the workload. Again, these are the targets that we're hoping to achieve, given that we have the proper resources to be able to complete those. And again, just on the technology front, looking at making strategic investments in our processes, and where we can further align our systems and enhance our systems so that we reduce the amount of, should we say, transactional items to more high-level tasks. And of course, budget approval to be able to have the funding resources to achieve all of our goals.
Any questions from council to the Director of Finance? Not seeing any. I could just have a quick comment. There's a lot of spam email that's still getting through, so I would share those concerns that there something needs to be done. I think I was like copied or hacked or something like a week ago. So, and it's happening like frequently. I've seen it with other people as well. So just a note. Okay, next up is corporate services.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'll take that one. So in corporate services, several of these are carry forward from last year. The youth engagement program, that's something that council was wanting to tackle last year. Unfortunately, it didn't get as far as we hoped, but I know we have plans this year. Talking to Councillor Parker, who was the initiator of that. So we budgeted $1,000 for that. The IT program, we did a study last year to look at enhancing our ITs. And I know Renato has been looking at expanding that further based on the feedback of the study. So we're looking at that. The actual cost is not known at this time. Contribution from reserves. Renato, do you want to talk about the IT? I guess you're better suited for that one.
Yes, thank you. So we have an annual contribution to the IT reserves for future hardware replacements. So this just identifies what that number is. We recover those from all the departments and then contribute that to the reserves, which then fund the computer replacement and the cell phone replacements. On the computer replacements, so our annual spend is around $62,000, what we're budgeting. And then in terms of cell phone replacements as well, again, in line with the life cycle of those assets. But this is an area where we will do some additional work in 23 because IT assets are part of the asset management plan. And it's an area where we'll need to make sure that we improve the data accuracy that we have, and in the future be able to better align our needs to the replacement cycles. So as of the moment, this is mostly a carry forward with some adjustments, especially on the cell phone replacements. We've doubled the amount from last year just because normally when we take a look at, we've been carrying some cell phones for 7 years. And we know batteries die out after 2 years. There's a lot of breaks, a lot of fixes. We've been having to replace quite a number of them. So we're enhancing the amount that we're replacing, which puts us on a trajectory to replace the entire cell phone fleet, if you call it, every 4 years.
Councillor Parsons?
So that's just on the computer replacement piece. Did I understand that we're going to get some sort of report in terms of the life cycle data that supports this.
We are working on that as part of our overall assessment of the IT asset class. So yes, that is something that will be worked on. I can't provide a time frame at the moment, but we'll be able to inform council what that replacement cycle is. We can do it for some of the assets. One of the things in terms of our overall network is that because we are integrated as part of what's called COIN, the County of Oxford Integrated Network. So in essence, the county provides services to most of the lower tiers. So it in essence is our internet service provider. So they control basically the wide area network, and then we're a component of that network. And so we're just working through ensuring that we have accurate data on all the components of the network, all the switching, all the that are part of what we own and what we have to replace. And so once we have that, then we'll be able to provide council with an updated IT inventory and the overall strategy in terms of replacement cycles.
Through the mayor. So in addition to what Renato was saying there, once we get that established, then we'll look back at the IT implementation plan. And we'll look to bring some of those items forward in a later year, just because we need to get our bread and butter down first with those items and start growing the municipality from that respect.
Any other questions? I turn it back over to you to finish.
So in regards to some opportunities and challenges for the corporate service departments, in the clerk departments, there will be increased efficiencies while ensuring record retention best practices by converting all permanent files to electronic format. So that's something since I've been hearing that a lot of our files, and we all see that still, a lot of them are hard files, if you will, not electronic. So we need to use our Laserfiche more and get everyone to start putting items into Laserfiche. I understand, as you know, there's staff turnover, new staff, that everything's getting put in the Laserfiche, but that's something we need to focus on in 2023. And of course, customer service, with the assistance of the right tools and technology, we can see efficiencies, which will result in excellent customer service. And we're already seeing that at our front counter. Again, the customer service staff are exceptional and supports, and we get them the right tools. Again, this little things that resetting our phone trees, the phone tree wasn't proper where it was going to different people. You know, within one click, I was getting calls. It was important to get that phone tree to the right people. So we're just reviewing the IT component in that respect to get the proper tools for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the CAO? No, seeing none. The next department is Operations and Development Services. So Jonathan, you're up.
Through the mayor, take your lead. I will just kind of take a broad overview of some of the major projects in terms of the nuances that are related to them. As you can recall, at the previous council, Yonge Street was identified as an early approval and will be subsequently tendered out and early in the new year. Going back to asset management, and you'll hear me doing this as well. I'm an asset management guy, if you haven't been already able to tell, but the Norman Heights subdivision, I'd like to pick on that one just for a second. This is a perfect example of inventory control as it relates to our asset count. The street lights are in fact ours. The poles are THIs. We have to account for these things. This is why you're seeing a one-off this year. Moving ahead, this inventory will be included in our asset management portfolio, among others, as we go along. So that's why the cost is borne to a certain extent in the operations portfolio and not THI. The airport apron extension, that is subject to a potential land sale coming ahead. So that's worth noting as well. Townsend Line was also another one with early approval. I would also, sorry, I should have said, the justification is in and around page 135 or tab 6, with the details of the explanation of the projects if more information is required. Going straight into the fleet assessment, the breakdown here, because again, it was identified through this discussion that there's a lot in terms of that inventory. We kind of clustered them together for heavy, medium and light. With respect to everything that the Councilor Parker has brought up today, we'll be looking into bringing in some justification in terms of the trucks at the very least, so that the appropriate information can be here for council's consideration as we go through the budget. And again, there's supplementary information and a breakdown of our asset inventory as it relates to some of the proposed purchases for snowplow equipment and sidewalk machines. So getting into the opportunities and the risks that are associated with the operations department, regulation 588 with the -17, which is the asset management regulation. We need to continuously move ahead in terms of our inventory control. I know I've been saying that already, but there's a twofold benefit to this. There's another consolidated linear asset ECA approval that relates to our stormwater management. So this is good housekeeping in terms of ECAs that we'll be able to do two things at once by doing inventory control. We'll also be able to get a license from the Ministry of Environment where our ECAs will be automatically approved internally, so we don't have to go back to them for plans of subdivision for the Ministry of Environment to say that Storm Pond is acceptable. So that'll be something that we begin gearing towards in 2023. I've been through it before in a previous life. It does take some time, about 6 months was what I recall last time. So continuing implementations of records management and public works and engineering is an ongoing exercise. The biggest one that we'll have to tackle through our asset management portfolio in 2023, reflecting 2024, is our stormwater controls. We need to kind of evaluate a master plan. Again, the only reason I bring that up is Bill 23 kind of throws a curveball on how we can get to a functional stormwater master plan, because that's no longer acceptable to go through development charges unless the legislation changes. So that's an important note to bring up. Implementation of water main disinfection and flushing program, part of the county budget, 2.5, I believe, Richard, that nod I need for staffing complement for the water group or water sanitary group has been tabled at the county level. That more reflects our levels of service and taking on more subdivisions, more services. So that's been placed in the county budget as well. And that reflects some of the flushing programs that we'll be doing on their behalf as we move ahead. So I can take a quick pause there and then transition into building, planning and bylaw afterwards if there are any questions.
Councilor Parsons?
Yes, Madam Mayor, excuse me. Madam Mayor, through you to the director, just for terminology, please, slide 3 in your business plan, CU and CF. Can you just tell me what those acronyms are? Bottom of page, slide number 3 there.
I'll have to get back to you on that. I inherited some of the spreadsheet.
Okay, and also, if you will, the top of the next page, QLT, that'd be QLT, RW and CF again. I just like to know what those acronyms mean. They're not on the page that was given to us of acronyms, so thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? I have one quick question. Recently, a big document was put together, a development document by, I know that Shane worked on it extensively, and it identified like certain types of streetlights. So if those streetlights are being replaced in Van Norman Heights subdivision, are they going to like fall within what is allowed within that development document?
I can certainly return with a more refined answer, but I would believe that if the document has been endorsed, then we would be following that policy or procedure that we've identified in consultation with THI.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick one through you, Mayor, to Jonathan. The Bill 23, there's a lot of answers that are a lot of questions that need answering on this, but when it comes to covering of the lot, Right now, I believe with planning, we're allowed something like 35% lot coverage, and Bill 23 will require more. Is there risk to the town here in terms of flooding or stormwater management or stormwater ponds that have to be reviewed in the near future, or is that a premature question?
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, yes, that is a concern. What would be interesting in terms of the interpretation and authority that Bill 23 will offer to developers or the organization will be if we can put in interim controls by bylaw in terms of intensification. That's really the only opinion that I have to date that can kind of offer some relief, but that is subject to the actual regulation itself and the authority, which we don't have. We've just been informed that these are the changes coming forth. And obviously some of that will be challenged, but if you're looking in terms of the intensification impervious material, it is a concern.
But it doesn't affect the budget here.
It would not reflect the budget now. We'd have to probably take a one-year baseline to see what could come out of it. And again, project forward in terms of intensification, kind of a baseline with building to say how many people are actually going to put 3 units on a single lot. How many consent files are we getting on average that are 10 or less? And then we quantify our response. Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to be a proactive individual, this might be a reactive state because the legislation just gives so much broad interpretation that it's too hard to pin down. Exactly.
Are you continuing on? Okay, go ahead. There's no other question. Oh, Counselor Spencer.
Could you just let me know where Van Norman Heights is?
Through the mayor, I believe that is in the northwest. I may be wrong. I'm still getting my feet wet in terms of all the street names. But I believe it's in the northwest. Unless somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I actually looked at the name. I actually looked at the name as well, because there's Van Norman Drive, which I think you're well aware of. And I think I've never seen it referred to as Van Norman Heights. So I'm wondering if that's the area we're referring to, which is by the community center. So Cephas. It was referred to Van Norman Heights in the binder, and I did take a double take too. So yeah. Maybe someone could clarify that somewhere down the road.
Through the mayor, I will follow up with clarification.
Thank you. Proceed forward.
Okay. So building bylaw and planning, this is it will be another quick one as well. The major components related to building are going to be the impacts of Bill 23 and some of the streamline of our processes as it relates to planning. As you are familiar with, cloud permit has been implemented for our building control and our permit systems. It will be extended into an accounting initiative for the plans of subdivisions and consents and minor variances in the future. We don't have a tentative timeline in terms of when that's actually going to come to full force and effect. However, there are a couple of items that would be noted through the process in terms of the planning and building department, and that's mainly related to cleaning up on some of our bylaws and assessments and reviews of thereof. I think it's really important to keep with our tradition that Gino has established with the building community and having a yearly presentation with our group. I think that's very relative this year, again, with all the changes in the legislation. Some of the risks and exposures as it relates to this department are also related to staffing and reflect some of the core areas that we use or refine in terms of bylaw enforcement, being one that the ticketing of individuals and overnight parking for snow removal. So we'll be bringing some reports back to reflect that. I think this one is a pretty straightforward synopsis in terms of the budget allocation, but I'll open the floor for any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Is that questions for the entire tab or just for the building at this point? I have a question, for example, tab 6, 22, 23. I'm just trying to get clarification. Is that the mechanic shop? We haven't got it in your business plan yet, but it's in the deck. That'll be under, well, it's up here on 22, 23, excuse me. Here. It's under fleet. And I'd just like to know, is that the mechanics shop? Because I have some questions for that. Thank you.
Richard, would you be able to offer any insight in terms of that proposal? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was just looking up where Van Norman Heights is. If I could do before I'm gonna either repeat your question. Van Norman Heights is referred to Van Norman, Centennial, and parts of Lisgar. The street lighting in that area. I just did a quick look into it. I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor. Can you please repeat your question?
Yes, yeah, I'm just looking at page 23 in tab 6, and it's listed under fleet. I'm wondering, I'm expecting that could be the mechanical shop and fleet. And specifically the question is labor at $343,900. How many staff, if that is the mechanic shop, how many staff are employed there? And also I see under that same slide, debt, principal, and interest that I'm not seeing on perhaps some other slides. I'd like to understand that better. If either you or the director of finance can clarify this for me, I'd appreciate it.
I don't have the details of the,
Labor that we have is related, we have 3 identified FETs right there.
FTEs.
Yes.
Yeah, in for fleet, yes. Yeah, there's 2 mechanics in the fleet supervisor in that.
Perhaps Shane can speak to the debt and the principal and interest, because he maintains the listing of the payments related to the debt and can clarify what debt was taken out for this budget.
Hello, Council, through Madam Mayor to Councillor Parson. So yes, the fleet department is the division out at Spruce Street. There is 3 FTEs. 1 position is vacant at the current moment, which is the fleet supervisor. And then the debt, principal, and interest is there for excuse me, the purchases of units over the course of the years. And those are obviously the principal and interest payments related to those units. The debt details is in tab 11, and I know we'll cover that in later meetings, but we can always get further details of what units and how much is remaining, if that answers your question.
Yes, partly. Thank you. But is it through you, Madam Mayor, to the Director of Finance, is that normal to be an operating expenditure as opposed to something related to capital? We're paying for fleet for capital items and financing them. Is that typical to be a operational expense? Thank you.
Yes, it's capital when we make the acquisition, but then the payment of principal and interest is an operating item.
Any other questions? Councillor Parker?
Not a question, but a resolution. I think this is the appropriate time. We were speaking about the new ATV earlier, so moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart. The Project X51 new ATV be moved from the 2023 budget to the 2024 budget, and I'd like to speak to that. As we discussed earlier, the fire chief said that it was a 2024 budget item, but it was in the budget now as 2023. So I'd like to put it to the area that it should be.
Yes, it is attached to fleet, so I think it is appropriate to do that resolution now. Does anyone have any questions with regards to that resolution? We're good. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's carried, no opposed. Are there any other?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I could.
Yep.
Please, a few more items under this particular tab. Just engineering. I'm looking at engineering here on my binder, page 27 and tab 6. And my question is, we had grants of $70,000 in this year, in 2022, this past year, and there I see no grants. I wonder if someone could explain that going forward for the 4 years, no more grants, if someone could explain that for me. Thank you.
I can field that question through the mayor to Councillor Parsons. In the 2022 budget, the 70,000 was a portion of the OSIF formula funding to help our GIS and our asset management review. And then so that was just an allocation in 2022, and then in 2023, it's no longer there.
Thank you. Perhaps just if I can continue, Madam Mayor, on the same tab. I'm looking at page 32, 33. And that being particularly on 33, I guess, under the airport. I'm seeing over the course of the 4-year plan, user charges constant at 385,000. And yet we're seeing the net levy on that department growing from 42,000 this year up to 48,000. So we have expenses growing at the airport. I know there's been a lot of work done recently at the airport, but my question is about user fees and the wisdom of just leaving user fees at a constant and not looking to get a little more revenue that way to cover off some of these expenses.
Through the mayor to the councillor, there's two answers or two things I'd like to bring to light. The first one is that annually there has been a request to the county of Oxford in terms of covering some of the deficit, and we did do that again this year. In terms of incurring more user charges to become cost neutral, I think that's where we're all trying to strive towards. The fees and charges bylaw has reflected will be reviewed every single year in order to calibrate some of those fees. There is a caveat to that. Some of the leases do not have the same agreement throughout, so I will be doing a deep dive in terms of how do we get to that. Additionally, last year in 2022, there was a master plan of sorts that was presented, and it identified that cost neutrality would be very close with an introduction of another 5 to 10 hangars, and reflects, some of the apron expansions. If we have the hangars there, then we need the taxiway. So it's kind of, there's a little bit more investment to get there, but it's something that we will be striving towards.
Just follow up, Your Worship. I thank you for the answer. It's a great asset for our town, for our economic development. But I think there's a lot of other users, a lot of other municipalities benefit from that airport, and we're paying the freight. And I sure hope that we can find the neutrality or close to that going forward. Thank you. And I have another question in engineering, if I could. I'll be brief.
I just wanted to comment on the airport. I agree with you, and I think your comments are bang on. There has not been a lot of support at the upper tier level for the regional airport, and it does provide services to all the county. So I totally concur with your comments, and I want to thank you for bringing them forward.
Thank you, Worship. We look for some success there. My next question is going to be under pages 34, 35, index 6. And it deals with waste, particularly page 35. So again, I see user charges being constant through the 4-year plan. I guess that would be fees from bag tags, I'm going to suppose. And yet we have rising costs steadily subsidized through taxation over the 4-year plan. I think this does involve the county. I look for some edification on this, but is there any way that we can look to try to get more neutrality in the budget? On page 35 of the hard copy deck, tab 6. So just carrying on the revenue stream there's grants and then there's user charges. User charges are steady at 131,400 over the 4-year plan, and yet our expenditures continue to rise. So obviously through the levy, through taxpayers, we're subsidizing. We're subsidizing that account, that activity. And I was just looking for if there's any way to get to neutrality or close to it.
I'm actually going to step in on this one because I was just at county budget on Monday. So your concerns are valid, and I think that I know that there was some discussion around this last year. In the county budget this year proposed, and this was actually one of my questions to Renato. The county budget is proposing $213,260 to the transfer station, $48,810 to the yard waste, and $9,551 to a one-day large pickup. The county has been funding Woodstock for a number of years with their transfer station. So this is, an equity, let's make it right proposal. So obviously the budget hasn't passed yet, but it is proposed. And I was wondering, does our budget take into account this proposed funding from the county or not? Or is it completely reflecting that the town will have to, have all these expenses? I guess we don't know, so it should, because we don't know at this point if it'll go through, but it is proposed.
Just gonna be asking Shane Serafin, for those that may not know, Shane is our deputy treasurer. And he does a lot of the interactions with all things financials to do with the county, so he's in a better position to answer.
Through the mayor, I guess to the mayor, or maybe to Councillor Parsons. So what's in the 2023 draft operating budget for waste management in terms of the grants from the county is what we kind of received from last year, which I think you see on page 35, it's 103,000. So when the budget was prepared, town staff was unaware of or unsure of what that number was going to be going forward. So if county council passes the 200,000+, and so that revenue is not, the difference is not incorporated into the current draft budget. So then that would ultimately lower the operating budget to account for that revenue. If that answers the question.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your concerns as well? Yeah, and I don't think the county budget, I think they're not looking to pass that till maybe the end of January, towards the end of January. So, but it is proposed, it is an equity funding, so I hope that sheds some light on it. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I think we could wrap up for lunch.
Yes.
So about half an hour,
Yes,
as
Madam
lunch
Mayor.
is here.
Madam Mayor, I'll try to be brief. Again, I'm staying with tab 6. Pages 36, 37. In particular, this is transit, particularly on page 37. We're seeing a revenue stream, user charges. This is for transit. And we're seeing a revenue stream that's projected to decrease substantially over the 4-year plan. And yet our money that we're asking from taxation to subsidize transit is growing. It's growing, from 171,000 up through 259,000. And I'm troubled by the fact that and also the grants are falling. I suppose those are going to be MTO grants or provincial grants, but the user charges are going down steadily and our costs are going up, and that troubles me. I'm not sure that the taxpayers want to subsidize that transit system. I think the idea, it was great to bring online and to help people that need a ride around town or to work or whatever, but looks to me like it's going to be costly. And I'd like to get some comments on that. Thank you.
It's through the mayor to the councillor. Again, a loaded question. The gas tax has been extended to 2025, which subsidized some of the grant portfolio as it relates to transit. We have 2 systems here that we manage. So this year we will have to present to the province a feasibility study that I would suggest that should intersect our overall cost for future consideration. Barring that consideration, transit typically is a subsidized program to a certain extent. But we could certainly consider the increase of user fees as it would relate, but that would be subject to the gas tax formula and the relationship we have with the province until 2025, but we'd have to look into that.
Thank you for the answer, and I look forward to what will come from that. But I was involved years ago with the beginning there, they attempted the pilot of a transit system in Tilsbergen. And unfortunately, we're not able to make it pay, and the commitment was we had to close it. And I hope we don't have to do that, but I'd like to see this become a little closer to neutral and not such a subsidized cost. So that's going to be an ongoing issue, I think, for me at least. Thank you.
I think that that's a good point too. And if you, I think it's almost on the very last page of the agenda, if you noted the budget survey. And I think I'm pretty positive it's 4 years in a row that when you survey the populace, and there were 400, there were quite a few participants that filled it out. Transit continues to be and has been in the last 4 years. The I guess at the bottom of the list of what people consider to be priorities. So any other questions? And then we'll